The rain hammered the rooftops of Gotham, lightning carving jagged veins across the night sky. Beneath the city, where even rats dared not tread, Batman moved like a whisper through ancient stone corridors. These tunnels predated Gotham by centuries, hidden beneath layers of concrete and myth. Tonight, he hunted. Rumors had spread of an artifact tied to the Court of Owls, an object of impossible age and sinister power. Dozens had disappeared. Sacrifices, symbols etched in alleyways, whispers in the underworld. Something old had awakened, and Batman was going to end it. He dropped into the darkness, his cape flowing behind him like a living thing. The narrow shaft opened into a vaulted chamber where bone-white masks glittered in the torchlight. Cultists surrounded a stone box engraved with symbols that hissed at the mind. Batman's eyes narrowed. He struck like a predator. Screams echoed as he moved through them with brutal efficiency. An elbow shattered ribs. A kick dislocated a jaw. A batarang flashed through the air, disabling a weapon. In moments, the chamber fell silent, and only the box remained. Batman knelt beside it. The symbols weren't the Court of Owls. They were older. He activated his gauntlet. "Alfred," he said, "I've found the source. It's emitting some kind of frequency." Before his faithful butler could respond, the artifact pulsed. A surge of energy erupted, symbols glowing blood red. Reality bent. The air screamed. Batman's senses went white. Smoke curled and twisted through the air like grasping fingers. The crater was deep. Charred earth. Smouldering debris. The scorched remains of a shattered steel platform. At the center, something moved. Batman's gloved hands clenched against the ash. He stirred, groaned, and slowly sat upright. His armor was scorched, the matte black plating pitted with burn marks. His cape was torn at the edges. His cowl's HUD flickered erratically. Sparks danced across the inside of his visor. A warning tone beeped sharply in his ear. HUD alert. GPS null. Oxygen levels low. Atmospheric composition toxic. Language packets corrupted. He exhaled through clenched teeth, breath fogging against his mask. The air was heavy with industrial soot and machine oil vapor. Overhead, blackened clouds churned like molten iron in a forge. Faint lights blinked far above. But there were no stars, only towers, spires, cables, and perpetual smog. All around him stretched a city beyond comprehension. Not a city, a hive, miles wide, thousands of levels deep. A mechanical mountain built by mad gods. The architecture was grotesque. Colossal statues of a robed, imperious figure stood sentinel over streets teeming with misery. Glaring vox screens flashed golden symbols alongside the face of a radiant man with eyes like fire. A voxcaster blared, "Glory to the God Emperor of mankind. Obedience is salvation. Heresy is death." Batman rose slowly. His joints ached from the impact, but nothing was broken. Not yet. This isn't my Earth, he thought, nor any other Earth I know. He moved from shadow to shadow, his eyes scanning the environment. Drones floated overhead, mechanical skulls with glowing red eyes. Servitors with cables embedded in their skulls dragged carts of waste across iron tracks. Gangs moved in the alleys, their faces masked, their weapons drawn. Preachers screamed from pulpits atop steel altars. Repent, repent. The eye watches, the warp devours. He pulled a tattered cloak from a refuse heap, wrapping it over his armor. He couldn't afford to draw attention. Not here. Not yet. His tech was compromised. The Bat computer was fried. Alfred was silent. But he still had his instincts, his training. That would be enough. The deeper he moved into the Hive's arteries, the worse it became. Tunnels of filth and grime, people with augmetics replacing limbs. Children were coughing blood into rags. Graffiti in High Gothic warned of plague and heresy. Sirens wailed far above. Somewhere, gunfire erupted, and no one reacted. Then he heard it, a scream. He turned sharply, bolting into a side alley choked with steam. There, beneath flickering yellow lights, a woman was cornered by 3 twisted figures. They weren't just gang members. They were mutants. Flesh warped, jaws unhinged, one with mechanical claws grafted onto his wrists. Their eyes gleamed with hunger. "Your rations, now," the tallest one snarled, his voice distorted by a damaged vocal box. The woman clutched a satchel to her chest. "Please, my daughter." "Then you both die hungry." The leader raised a rusted cleaver, and Batman fell on them like a storm. The first criminal never saw it coming. A precise strike to the throat dropped him silently. The second spun around, only for a batarang to strike his eye, sparking violently as the augmetic implant burst. The last one swung wildly, but Batman ducked low, surged forward, and drove a knee into the creature's abdomen, followed by a twisting strike that shattered his arm. Bones snapped. Screams echoed. The alley fell silent. The woman stared up at him, trembling. "What are you?" she whispered. Batman stared back through the slits of his cowl, the shadows framing him like wings. But before she could say another word, he was gone, melting into the darkness. Across the Hive, in a towering bastion of Gothic steel and roaring flame, the Adeptus Arbites interrogated a bloodied, half-mad mutant. The room was suffocating, its air thick with incense and static. Crimson light from lumen strips bathed the chamber in a hellish glow, casting long shadows across steel walls covered in purity seals and the flayed skin of executed heretics. The mutant trembled in a metal restraint chair, his body spasming, his eyes wide with terror. "It dropped from the sky," the creature wailed, bloody claws raking across its face. Black wings, eyes like burning stars. "It judged us. It judged us." Inquisitorial data feeds flickered on cogitator screens, and the Arbites Marshal stepped into the light. His armor was thick, black as coal, etched with golden aquillas and layered with parchment scrolls. A bolt pistol rested on his hip. His gaze was a glacier. "Demon?" he asked, his voice like gravel across ice. A scribe in red robes stepped forward, his fingers twitching across a data slate. "Possibly a Xenos construct, or a warp-spawned entity," No records match its description, but it clearly acts with intent. The Marshal's lips curled into a grimace. I don't care if it came from the Eye of Terror itself. No one dispenses judgment in my hive but the Emperor's law. Deploy suppression squads, activate sector lockdown, seal the lower spires. He leaned over the sobbing mutant, his voice low and cold. If this thing wants war, then we will show it what war looks like. Far above the choking smoke and the crawling chaos of the hive, on a shattered aqueduct that cut across the sky like a broken bridge between hell and something worse, Batman stood alone. Wind howled past him, tearing at his ruined cloak. His silhouette was etched against the sky, jagged towers behind him like the teeth of some sleeping demon. Below, the hive city sprawled outward and downward, a nightmare in metal and flame. Miles of endless habitation blocks, manufactoria, and agony stretched into infinity. Gotham had been a cesspool, but it had been his cesspool. He knew its shadows, its predators, its broken heroes. Even its madness had rhythm. But this place, this was different. This was a world ruled by fire and fanaticism, a world where law came from the barrel of a bolt gun and heresy was a death sentence. It was cruel, merciless, bleeding from 1,000 wounds, and too blind to see them. He stared into the endless dark horizon. Somewhere, hidden in the choking madness, were answers, maybe even a way home. But he wasn't naive. This place would not give them freely. He would need to take them. And if this world had tyrants, if it had monsters, enforcers, zealots, and warlords, then it had just inherited something else. A shadow, a hunter, a guardian. It had the Batman. Smoke and ash clung to the hive's lower levels like rot in a wound. It had been 3 days since Batman first fell into this nightmare. 3 days of endless darkness, poisoned air, and brutal survival. The hive city had no horizon, only layers, levels stacked like tombs. Gangs ruled the alleys, enforcers ruled the rest. And above it all, a rotting theology echoed from bronze-clad foxhorns, louder than conscience. In the depths of Sector C-47, where even the red-robed Mechanicus dared not venture, he found it. A crumbling ruin tucked between 2 collapsed hab blocks. Its roof had caved in centuries ago, but the ferrocrete basement had still held. No light reached its walls. No cameras floated in its air. It was dead space, forgotten, quiet, perfect. Base of operations established. He reinforced the steel doors, rerouted dormant power lines to a cracked cogitator system. He repaired his gauntlets and scanner array, using scavenged components from a collapsed tech shrine. It wasn't the Batcave, but it would serve its purpose. Each night he ventured into the hive. By dawn, he returned with new tools. A shock maul stripped from a fallen hive-ganger, a neural whip, a cracked plasma cell from a wrecked servitor. He jury-rigged his EMP batarangs to disable security drones. He fitted his gauntlets with a localized power stun module. Every piece he scavenged made him stronger. He didn't strike with justice. He struck with survival. Word spread. Some called him the Wraith, the Shadow Saint, the Black Seraph. A myth told over barrel fires and in sewer grates, something that moved through the iron arteries of Hive Primaris, silent and violent. Gangers whispered of a winged terror that left nothing but bones behind. Tech priests dismissed it as nonsense. Enforcers grew quiet. But the Arbiters were listening. That night, he moved through the heights of Hab Level 221B. The air was cleaner here, barely. The people dressed in cracked uniforms and wore respirators, even indoors. But crime still festered, and the weak still bled. Batman perched on a collapsed balcony, watching everything below. A figure darted through the alley, a woman, clutching a bag, breathing hard. Behind her, 2 men pursued. One held a shock baton, the other carried an auto pistol. A classic mugging, or so it seemed. He dropped. A glide from above, silent as thought. He landed in the alley behind them. The woman stumbled to the ground, crying out. The 2 attackers turned. Before either could react, Batman surged forward. His gauntlet cracked across the pistol wielder's jaw, sending him sprawling. A shock batarang nailed the second in the chest, convulsing him into a shaking heap. And then the woman rose, not stumbling, not afraid. With mechanical precision, she turned, leveling a compact las pistol at his head. "Target confirmed," she said flatly. "Execute protocol." The fallen men stood up, their faces cold, their eyes gleaming beneath visors. Their uniforms shimmered as disguise protocols were deactivated, revealing the black armored forms of the Adeptus Arbiters. Batman's eyes narrowed. Ambush. Dozens emerged from the side alleys and rooftops. Arbiters with riot shields, shock mauls, net cannons, grav binders. They moved like a wall of death. "Surround and detain," barked the lead marshal. "Non-lethal force authorized. He's worth more alive." They surged. Batman responded in kind. He leapt into the air, cape flaring, throwing 3 smoke bombs that exploded in crackling bursts. The alley became a cyclone of noise and shadow. His fists found gaps between armor plates. A rising knee dislocated a jaw beneath a helmet. He vaulted over a riot shield, twisting mid-air, and threw a batarang that overloaded a grav choke collar. But they were prepared. A shot net fired from the dark, wrapped around Batman's torso. Electricity surged. He gritted his teeth and dropped to one knee. 2 Arbiters lunged, electromauls raised. He activated the EMP pulse in his gauntlet. The net fizzled out. The mauls sparked out. He roared, driving a shoulder into the one assailant's chest and sent him crashing through a wall of crates. Las bolts hissed by his head. A stun grenade exploded behind him. The world turned white. He staggered for a moment. Pain lanced through his side. An Arbiter's enforcer had driven a shock maul into his ribs. He countered with a rising elbow, but another struck him from behind. Blood began to fill his mouth. There were too many. He hurled a flash charge upward, a thundercrack, a wall of sound. Using the brief moment of chaos, he grapple-hooked to the ledge above, barely catching the edge. A bolt round clipped his shoulder. Armor cracked. Pain flared. but still he climbed. Every muscle burned. He vaulted across rooftops, ducking incoming lasfire. Behind him, the Arbiters gave chase, their voxcasters echoing commands. The Wraith is on the move, direction Theta Sector. Cut off his escape. Batman dove into a maintenance shaft and slammed the hatch behind him. He dropped 2 floors, broke through a vent, crawled through sludge and steel, and screamed through clenched teeth as his wounds tore open again. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached the ruined house, his lair. He collapsed inside, breathing ragged, blood trailing behind him, vision blurry, but alive, just barely. He sealed the steel doors, engaged the counter-surveillance grid, and activated emergency triage. The machine hissed as Medicae foam sprayed across his side. His fingers trembled. He clenched them into fists. They knew he was here now, and he'd barely survived. Miles above him, inside a towering Arbiter's command sanctum, the Marshal stood silently as the last of his squad limped in, some bruised, some bleeding, none victorious. The creature escaped, the officer reported, shame in his voice. The Marshal said nothing. Then the chamber's great iron doors opened. Bootsteps echoed like gunshots. A figure approached. Tall, robed in black and crimson, his armor shimmered with golden inquisitorial seals. A servo skull hovered behind him, trailing parchment. His face was obscured by a metal half-mask, shaped like a screaming angel. Inquisitor Varnax, the Marshal said, standing at full attention. The Inquisitor's voice was cold, measured, ancient. I've read your reports. This entity, this wraith, does not match any recorded species or demon class. No, my lord. And it resists apprehension with trained efficiency, intelligence, purpose. Yes, my lord. Varnax turned his burning gaze to the tactical display. Then I will deal with it personally. Assemble your squads. He paused. And pray, Marshal, that the next time you face this shadow, you bring me its corpse. Back in the darkness, behind iron and shadows, Batman sat in silence. His armor was cracked. His ribs were bruised. Blood pooled on the ground. He stitched his side in silence, and then, slowly, he reached for the cracked cogitator. He plugged in his gauntlet, rewrote the interface with brute force code. Schematics flickered across the screen. Maps, vaults, surveillance relays. He would need better weapons. He would need to strike back. The Inquisition was coming for him. Ash swirled in the stale air of Hive Primaris, thick as oil, clinging to every surface. Batman moved like smoke through the underhive, his body stiff with pain, but guided by purpose. He had nearly died in the last encounter, but he had survived. That mattered. But now, it was time to evolve. The Arbiters had underestimated him. The Inquisition would not. He needed information. He needed firepower. He needed to go on the offensive. It took 2 days of crawling through maintenance shafts, bypassing data scribes and Ganga-controlled passages to find it. A forgotten conduit that led beneath an auxiliary supply depot guarded by the Astra Militarum. Most of the facility had been sealed off after a gene-stealer incursion a decade ago, but a small Imperial Guard outpost still operated above, surrounded by watchtowers, sentries, and defensive grids. Batman watched from a ruined hab spire, his HUD restored and scanning. The guards were lightly armoured, many exhausted, others distracted. Night rotation, minimal patrols. He tapped a control on his gauntlet, activating stealth mode. He descended from the sky like a phantom. The first guard didn't hear him. A thin whip lashed out from the darkness, wrapping around his neck, not to kill, but to render him unconscious. Batman caught the body mid-fall and dragged it silently into the shadows. The second was standing near a Vox terminal, smoking a EHO stick. A flashbang burst beside him, not loud, but bright enough to daze. By the time he blinked again, Batman was behind him, a palm pressed to his throat, delivering a shot from his gauntlet's newly enhanced power stun module. The man crumpled. He moved fast, precise. A neural batarang buzzed through the dark, striking a third sentry's spine, disabling his augmetics. Another fell to a weighted cloak toss, followed by a nerve pinch to the neck. He slipped through the corridors like a shadow, stitched to the walls. In the main storage vault, beneath a sealed blast door, he planted an EMP trap. The field shimmered blue, and the lock hissed open. Rows of weapons racks and armor lockers filled the room. Regulation gear, standardized by a crumbling Imperium. But to Batman, it was a forge. He worked quickly. Back in his lair, his cracked cogitator hummed with life. Holographic schematics danced across the screen as he dismantled the stolen equipment. The flak armor worn by the guardsman was heavy, but not invincible. He stripped it down to its composite layers, reweaving the plates with fragments of his own damaged batsuit. With scavenged servitor tools, he reforged the chest piece, integrating impact dampening gel from a damaged carapace vest. The result was sleek, layered, durable, and lighter than anything he'd worn before. He reinforced his gauntlets with ablative shielding. Retracted vibro blades now sat hidden along the forearms. A short-range signal scrambler had been mounted on the left bracer, adapted from a targeting module he'd torn from a fallen gun drone. But the most delicate work was the weapon. A lasgun lay disassembled across the table. Too powerful, too deadly for his code, but Batman wasn't interested in killing. He examined the laspack, the charge regulator, the emitter array. Then he began reworking the components. Hours passed. He bypassed the safety locks, scaled back the energy modulation, and restructured the internal capacitor to channel non-lethal concussive blasts. A stun rifle, based on Imperial tech, but shaped by a humanist mind. He tested it once, firing it into a salvaged armor plate. The impact sent it flying across the room. Perfect. He stood before a cracked mirror, now fully armored again. His cape, stitched and weighted, flared behind him. His cowl's eyes glowed faintly red. The armor, jet black with hints of steel and brass, reflected the world he had entered. Alien, brutal, but he was still Batman, still himself. And then, the world exploded. A high-pitched whine cut through the lair's silence. His proximity alarm screamed. The reinforced door blew inward in a blossom of fire and shrapnel. Steel folded like paper. Smoke rushed in. Bolter rounds shattered the wall behind him. He dove to the side, rolled behind his forge table. Sparks rained down from the ceiling. Heat washed over him. Through the breach marched soldiers clad in midnight black and gold. Troopers of the Inquisition, their helms shaped like morning angels. Las carbines swept the room. Incinerators hissed. Servo skulls scanned the dark. "Target located," one intoned. "Alive." Then another shape stepped through, taller than the rest. Inquisitor Varnax. His cloak burned at the edges, as if he walked through fire. His half-mask glowed with runes of judgment. His voice was calm. "End of the line, Shadow." Batman didn't respond. He vaulted over the table and hurled a magnetic mine. It struck one trooper's chest and activated with a burst of white-hot flash and an electromagnetic pulse. He was already moving. The upgraded armor absorbed 2 glancing las shots. His new cape caught a bolt round, slowing it before impact. He slid beneath a barrage and fired his stun rifle. 2 troopers spasmed and collapsed. He engaged the signal scrambler. Voxlings went dead. The stormtroopers hesitated, momentarily blind. Batman surged forward. He struck with the force of a thunderclap. One fist crushed a respirator. A knee shattered a power pack. A sweep kick brought down 2 soldiers in unison. He threw a trio of micro batarangs, now rigged with concussion tips. More entered. Flamers ignited. He dove into the adjoining chamber just as a bolt round tore through the edge of his cape, searing cloth and glancing off reinforced polymer. Smoke coiled through the breach beneath him. Shadows stuttered under the flickering emergency lights as troopers surged forward, their footsteps a mechanical march of judgment. Batman slammed his palm onto a pressure plate near the bulkhead. With a deep, metallic clang, a slab of salvaged plasteel, thick as a tank's hull, descended from the ceiling, sealing the entrance in a cascade of sparks and hydraulic shrieks. The air inside the chamber grew tighter, dimmer, silent. He bought himself maybe 90 seconds. Already, he could hear the whine of cutting torches on the other side. There was no time. He pivoted toward the cogitator console, the lifeline of his lair, and slid his fingers beneath the surface. A subtle click. A hidden panel hissed open beside the desk, revealing a narrow shaft descending into darkness. Without hesitation, he stepped in, then dropped. He fell through steam and pipe vapor, the heat brushing his cowl like breath from a living beast. Metal screamed beneath him as he landed hard in the depths, rolling to absorb the impact. His ribs protested. Blood trickled anew down his flank. Still, he rose. He ran. The crawlway was tight, barely tall enough to stand, but it was one of dozens he had memorized, mapped, and modified. A forgotten artery beneath the hive's skin. Pipes groaned above as he sprinted along iron catwalks and rusted rails. Every footstep echoed like gunfire. Water dripped from unseen valves. Rats fled before him. Behind him, the Inquisition followed. Sirens wailed like the city was weeping. Red lumen lights flashed along the walls, triggered by the breach. He could hear distant boots, dozens of them, spreading through the upper levels, sealing exits, deploying drones. But then, clear and sharp, slicing through the voxnet like a scalpel. I see you, Wraith. The Emperor sees you. There is no hiding from us. Inquisitor Varnax. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was colder than frostbite and heavier than steel. The voice of authority honed across 100 purges. Batman didn't respond. He didn't look back. He moved faster. He cut right, slid down a maintenance ladder slick with grime, crossed a narrow beam suspended over a chemical reservoir. The green liquid below hissed with acidic vapor. He didn't pause. He knew this path. He knew every curve, every step, every breath of this forgotten maze. This wasn't retreat. This was relocation. He reached a secondary bolt hole, no more than a chamber the size of a cargo container, stashed with backup supplies, oxygen tanks, and the remains of his stolen cogitator rig. He sealed the hatch behind him and slumped against the wall. His heart was pounding. His side burned. But his eyes burned brighter. The Inquisition had come with fire and fury. They had torn apart his base and declared him prey. But he had escaped. More importantly, he had kept his new weapon. He had kept the schematics. He had mapped their tactics, their response time, their gear. And now, for the first time, they had shown their hand. He tapped a panel on his wrist. His cracked gauntlet sparked to life, displaying fragments of recovered data. Names, locations, patrol routes, blueprints. He stared at the screen as the glow illuminated his face beneath the cowl. They think this city belongs to them, he thought. To fear, to tyranny, to blind obedience. But it belongs to those who know it best. And I've walked its veins, bled into its steel. I've breathed its poison. They declared war. Now they'll see what it means to fight in the dark. He stood, spine straightening, the sting of his wounds dulled by resolve. Somewhere above, the Inquisition searched ruins and ashes, but down here, something else was rising. Not a myth, not a ghost. A weapon, a reckoning. And next time, he would strike first. The underhive hissed like a wounded animal. Somewhere between crumbling steel veins and ash-choked conduits, the dark night watched. A dozen cracked display monitors flickered around him, stitched together from salvaged cogitators and fractured Auspex lenses. A holographic map hovered in the center of his bolt-hole hideout, cast in a spectral blue light. At the heart of it pulsed a single node. Inquisition Sub-Fortress Primaris, Sector D19. A black vault beneath the spires, sunk into the foundations of Hive Primaris like a thorn, guarded by troopers, cloaked in Vox silence, hidden from Imperial data links, but not from him. He'd studied their pattern for days. He watched patrols shift, interrogations carried out, prisoners marched in, never to return. Beneath that fortress, he was certain, lay the truth about how he had arrived in this nightmare, about what force had torn him from Gotham, about the anomaly that had changed everything. Now, he would walk into the lion's den. Batman stalked the magrail tunnel on foot, cloaked in shadow and silence. The suit's power-quiet systems rendered his footfalls soundless. The once stolen flak armor had been upgraded again, coated with a reactive dull-sheen fabric that diffused lumens and warped scanner profiles. Security drones passed above. He froze and crouched behind a collapsed pillar. Their scans pinged empty air. One twitched slightly, as if confused, but then floated on. He moved forward. 2 troopers blocked the southern intake gate, standing near an old freight lift. He dropped between them like judgment incarnate. A nerve strike to the first. A vibroblade hissed out from his gauntlet, slicing through the second's shock baton before it could rise. He caught the man mid-fall, lowered him silently, then activated the lift with a bypass spike. Down he went, into darkness. Level -6. Vaulted halls of gunmetal and brass greeted him. Cathedral-like corridors lit by flame sconces and glowing purity sigils. Servo skulls trailed incense. Stone cherubim lined the walls, clutching scrolls of judgment and oaths of wrath. Everything reeked of fear and finality. He moved with surgical precision. Security cameras were few, but he disabled them. Las trip alarms were mapped and avoided. At one junction he passed an interrogation chamber. Screams echoed behind its adamantine door. He paused, but time was short. He pressed on. Finally, he reached the central archive. A massive chamber, ringed with golden aquillas and sealed vaults. At its center, a cogitator pillar the height of a titan thrummed with data feeds. Cables the size of trees fed into it. A mechanized cherub rotated slowly in the air, reading scripture aloud. Batman crossed the room. He plugged in. His gauntlet interfaced, brute-forcing access through encrypted firewalls built by minds long dead. Streams of binary surged. Access denied. He recoded, rewired. Access granted. A flood of intelligence hit him. Anomalous warp signatures. A collapsing rift over Terra's orbit 3 nights ago. Psychic backlash across multiple hives. A figure seen falling from the sky encased in shadow and fire. Null field detections, interrogations, heresy reports. A term repeated again and again. Temporal displacement event, class Theos Obscura. They didn't understand what he was, but they feared it, so they hunted it. The cogitator's data stream still pulsed across the screen, fragments of truth flickering like dying stars. Warp anomalies, Terra's orbit rupturing, unidentified energy signatures. Then a sound. Click. Subtle, soft, but to him it roared like thunder. A whisper of breath, a shifting of air. He turned. Too slow. Boom. A las round slammed into his shoulder. The impact like being hit by a speeding train. His armor cracked and scorched. He flew backward, spinning through the air, slamming into the cogitator column with bone-rattling force. Pain bloomed like lightning. His vision pulsed red. Another bolt screamed past his head, blowing molten chunks from the column. He dove into cover, breathing raggedly, gritting his teeth. Blood soaked into his armor. Pain could wait. He had no choice. Boots stomped into the archive chamber with militaristic precision. Dozens of inquisitorial troopers, black-armored, their visors glowing faintly red. They fanned out in perfect unison. No shouting, no orders, no emotion. Just executioners moving in sync. Then came the voice, smooth, cold, final. Welcome, Wraith. From the darkness beyond the vault, Inquisitor Varnax stepped into the light like a shadow made flesh. His cloak of crimson and obsidian dragged the dust behind him. His mask, sculpted into the screaming face of an angel, glinted in the flickering firelight. Servo skulls circled him, chanting litanies of judgment. "You played your hand well," he said, each word dipped in iron. "But no predator escapes the eye of the Inquisition forever." Batman stood slowly, his shoulder numb, blood dripping in thick rivulets from his arm. But his eyes were still sharp, unbroken. "You set this up," he growled. Varnax gave the faintest nod. "We left the archive door open, planted data just close enough to the truth. We needed to know what you would do with it." He paused. "And now we know." The troopers raised their weapons. Lasguns, bolters, grav collars, neural lashes, all aimed at one man. But that man was Batman. He moved. A flash mine detonated at his feet, a thunderclap of light and force. The world turned to fire. He lunged left, low and fast, slamming a stun batarang into the first trooper's visor. Glass exploded and sparks flew. Another trooper lunged at him, but Batman caught his strike, twisted, and drove a shock spear through the gaps in his armor. Electricity surged. The man dropped in a convulsing heap. His las stun rifle snapped up. 3 silent bursts, each striking center mass. 2 more soldiers dropped like marionettes with their strings cut. Batman vaulted onto the cogitator pillar. Bullets whizzed beneath him. From above, he launched a pair of concussive charges. Shockwaves rippled through the room. Steel cracked. Several troopers flew back, smashing against marble columns with bone-crushing force. He dropped again, twisted mid-air. Slam! His boot struck a charging brute in the chest. The man folded, slammed into the floor. Smoke bombs hissed. A grey veil consumed the room. Batman vanished into the haze. He fired his EMP pulse. Every optic, scope, and servo skull in a 10-meter radius shorted out in a storm of static. Chaos erupted. But chaos wasn't enough. A flamer ignited the smoke. The inferno licked his side. Armor blackened. Flesh began blistering beneath. He screamed inside, but he didn't fall. But then, crack! A shock baton slammed into his skull. White light burst beneath his eyes. Blood sprayed the floor. He stumbled. 2 troopers tackled him. He elbowed one, shattering a visor, then flipped the other into a stone column. A third grabbed him from behind. He snapped the man's arm at the elbow with a sickening pop. He fought like a wounded beast, each strike calculated, brutal, efficient. But the tide was endless. A boot slammed into his gut. A rifle butt crashed down across his back. He collapsed to one knee, gasping. He tried to rise, tried. Then the air grew cold. Varnax approached. The troopers parted like water. His boots echoed in the silence as he stepped forward. His gauntlets shimmered with etched runes. The servo skulls whispered scripture as he extended a hand. "No more shadows," he said, and placed 2 fingers to Batman's temple. Pain. A psychic blast tore through Bruce's mind like shrapnel. Visions. Gotham. Alfred. Martha. A laughing face painted in red. Then fire. Terror. The Hive. Agony surged through every neuron. His spine arched. He tried to resist, clenched his jaw, bit back a scream. Blood leaked from his nose. His muscles trembled. The light in his cowl dimmed. Then darkness swallowed him whole. Batman fell. Somewhere below the Inquisition vaults, dim light flickered against black stone. Incense smoke curled through the cell like tendrils. Gothic arches framed the interrogation chamber, a sanctum of cold steel and sharpened oaths. Batman's wrists were bound in grav cuffs. His armor had been torn off in pieces. Blood dried across his face. Varnak stood above him, flanked by servo skulls and robed interrogators. "Begin purification protocols," he said. He turned toward the glowing slab of parchment affixed to a servo skull. "His mind holds secrets," he said, "and the Emperor demands an answer." The doors hissed shut. Chains rattled in the gloom. The interrogation chamber was a temple of suffering. Vaulted arches loomed like watching angels, their stone eyes blind to mercy. Cold brass icons of the Imperium stared down from the walls, watching the ritual unfold. Torches hissed, casting twisting shadows across the grim scene. Batman hung from grav cuffs, suspended by thick adamantium cables. His arms were stretched above his head. His feet barely touched the stone floor. Blood painted his side. Cracks webbed his cowl. One eye was swollen, but he remained upright, tense, silent. A servitor floated nearby, its syringe limbs twitching. Another held a rotating array of vibro scalpels, all glistening with sanctified oils. Liturgies of pain scrolled across the wall behind them, etched into gold leaf parchment. "Begin again," came the voice. Inquisitor Varnak stood just beyond the torchlight, flanked by 2 red-robed interrogators. The sigil on his breastplate glowed faintly, pulsing in time with Batman's heartbeat. A bolt of pain coursed through Bruce's body as a shock prod struck his side. He grunted, but didn't scream. Another strike, then another. Varnak stepped forward. "You fight like a post-human. You resist like an Astartes. Yet no records match your physiology. No gene print. No allegiance." The third interrogator stepped forward. A device like a crown of thorns crackled in his hand. "This will tear his mind apart," the tech priest warned. "No," Varnax replied. "He resists with purpose. Break his mind and we lose what he knows." He leaned closer. "Why are you here? What brought you to Terra?" Batman raised his head. "Your mistake is thinking I know." The Inquisitor stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Bring the Psyker." The chamber fell into eerie silence as the doors parted. A robed figure floated forward on a cloud of static energy. His eyes burned blue. Veins bulged across his bald scalp, tracing arcane runes. Chains bound his limbs. A muzzle of black steel framed his face. "He is dangerous," said one of the guards. "So is the target," Varnax replied. "Do it." The Psyker approached Batman and placed a single hand across his forehead. A soundless scream ripped through the chamber. The torches flickered. The walls trembled. Batman clenched his teeth, his entire body writhing against the grav cuffs. The Psyker's eyes rolled back. Blood leaked from his nose. Visions cracked through Bruce's mind like tidal waves. Gotham at dusk. The bat signal. Alfred's voice. A pearl necklace breaking on pavement. But he held. He endured. Finally, with a gasp, the Psyker broke contact. He stumbled back, collapsing into a pile of robes and convulsions. The air shimmered with psychic residue. Varnax knelt beside him. "What did you see?" The Psyker coughed. "He is not of this time, not of this place. His mind is wrapped in shadow, not sorcery. But human, entirely human. He comes from before. Before what? Before the Imperium. Before the fall. He is a fragment from another thread." Varnax stood slowly. He turned to Batman. "You serve neither Chaos nor Xenos. No warp signature, no corruption. Just defiance." Batman didn't answer. Varnax motioned. The chains were lowered. Bruce collapsed to one knee, then forced himself upright. The Inquisitor gestured for the guards to step back. "Enough," Varnax said. "Leave us." The guards hesitated for a second, but obeyed. Now, it was just the two of them. Varnax stepped forward, removing his mask. A face as scarred as a battlefield greeted Bruce's gaze. One eye was replaced with a mechanical lens. His flesh was etched with micro-runes, but beneath it, he was a human. He spoke quietly. "You are a ghost, out of time. You should not exist, yet you do. And you fight with conviction." Bruce breathed heavily, blood staining his jaw. "I serve no god, no empire, just the innocent." Varnax studied him. "Why here? Why intervene in our hive? Why not hide?" "Because when I see suffering, I can't look away. When I see evil, I don't walk past it. That hasn't changed. Not in this world. Not in any." Varnax tilted his head. "So you serve the people? Always? You are dangerous. To monsters, yes." A heavy stillness hung in the air, broken only by the low hum of grav cuffs and the occasional crackle from the wall-mounted torches that bathed the chamber in a flickering orange glow. The scent of incense was cloying, thick with the tang of iron and burning oils. Shadows stretched long across the stone floor, like the fingers of forgotten saints reaching out from the dark. Inquisitor Varnax stood in silent contemplation, the firelight dancing across the golden edges of his face. His voice, when it came, was quiet, measured. "The Imperium has no means of sending you back," he said, eyes fixed on the sigil-covered parchment in his gauntleted hand. "If you are a time-lost relic, The past is closed to you. That door will not open again. You must face that, Wraith. Batman sat still in the center of the chamber, his legs bound, arms shackled before him. His cape, laid out on the floor, was in tatters, blood caked in the folds. But his eyes, those eyes, remained fierce beneath the soot and bruising. He said nothing. Varnax lowered the parchment and took a slow step forward. Something is happening. Something terribly wrong. A rift over terror. Warp storms growing restless. Psychic echoes resonating across multiple hives. He stopped just short of the grav-bound figure. You did not arrive here by chance. There is purpose in the paradox. He stared into Bruce's eyes. Serve me, he said. Serve us. The Dark Knight's head tilted slightly, muscles tense. He didn't blink. Varnax continued. The Inquisition is not kind. We are not merciful. We are not even just. But we are necessary. The Imperium teeters on the edge of oblivion, and only those willing to fight in the dark will hold back the abyss. He circled Batman slowly, each step echoing like the toll of a distant bell. We need blades forged in silence, wills unbent by fear, minds that do not break in the presence of horror. He stopped behind Batman and leaned in. You want to protect the people? Then do so. Not from the rooftops, not in alleys, but from the shadows beneath this world, as one of us. Batman exhaled slowly, blood dripping from his chin. And if I refuse? Varnax stepped in front of him again. His mask caught the torchlight. Then by sunrise you will be dissected, purified, and fed to the reactors, he said flatly. A traitor, an anomaly, a threat eliminated. Silence fell again. The fire popped. Batman stared dead ahead, his jaw clenched tight. His body bore the signs of torment, bruises dark as night, burn marks scorched into his side. His skin was split from whippings and impact, but he sat upright, proud, defiant. The fire had not gone out in him. Varnax took one final step closer, his voice lowered to a whisper, yet it seemed to fill the entire room. This is your only offer. Then he turned. The massive iron door hissed open, its servos grinding with the weight of ages. Varnax walked through the threshold, his cloak trailing behind him like a shadow of judgment. He paused without turning. Decide before sunrise. The door slammed shut with a sound like the end of worlds, and Batman was alone. He sat in the quiet, lit only by the flickering torches, blood crusted on his fingers, smoke curling against the vaulted ceiling. The hum of the gravcuffs rose and fell like a heartbeat. He looked down at his hands, at the blood, at the chains, then up at the flame. And slowly, ever so slightly, he smiled. He was not broken, not beaten, only thinking and waiting. The night wasn't over yet. The light of morning never reached this deep into the hive, yet dawn had come. In the interrogation chamber, torches hissed softly, casting molten gold across damp stone. Smoke lingered like a breath held too long. The grav cuffs at the center of the room powered down with a sighing hiss. Bruce Wayne, the Wraith, the Bat, the Outsider, lowered his arms slowly, his body aching with 100 bruises and cracked ribs. Footsteps echoed. Inquisitor Varnax entered the chamber, flanked by 2 servo skulls and a pair of crimson-cloaked guards. His human eye was bloodshot with fatigue, but his tone was as cold as ever. "Have you made a decision?" Batman said nothing at first. Then he looked up from the shadows. His voice, though rough, was steady. "I accept." Varnax didn't smile, but something shifted in his expression, like the tension in a blade before the strike. "That is the right decision." With a subtle gesture, a robed adept stepped forward, carrying a black case marked with golden sigils. Inside it lay Batman's armor, repaired, reinforced, modified. The chest plate bore a small, solemn aquila beneath the bat emblem. His gauntlets were freshly recast, and the cape, though torn in aesthetic design, had a subtle shimmer to it now, a reactive defensive weave. Batman stared at the modifications. "Symbolism matters," Varnax said. "We marked you for what you are now, a sanctioned blade in the darkness." Bruce equipped his armor silently. The moment the cowl sealed with a pneumatic hiss, his eyes gleamed white. 2 hours later, Inquisitorial Briefing Chamber, Sector D-19. The War Chapel wasn't built for comfort. It was built for resolve. A vast chamber of burnished steel and blackened stone. It thrummed with hidden mechanisms and whispered litanies from hovering servo skulls. Saints carved in rusted iron stood vigil along the walls, each bearing reliquaries of shattered weapons or bleeding scrolls, their hollow eyes glaring down like silent judges. In the center stood the strategium table, a slab of iron wood and steel, engraved with the sigils of the Ordo Hereticus and sanctified with blood oil. On its surface, a holographic display shimmered, ghostly outlines of Hive Primaris, with veins of glowing red threads that pulsed with urgency. Batman loomed at its edge, cowl shadowed, arms crossed. He stared down at the holomap, silently absorbing the data that floated through the air like ghosts searching for form. Varnax stood beside him, fingers interlocked behind his back. "These are all recorded disappearances," Varnax said. 1,056 citizens, all from the lower Hive tiers. 6 weeks. No witnesses, no bodies, no screams on the Vox. Just silence. Batman's gauntlet moved. He dragged a spectral line across the holomap, fingers tracing through data feeds and report clusters. He said nothing for a long moment. Then, "There's a pattern." Varnax turned toward him. "Explain." Batman expanded the map. Each disappearance occurs within proximity to the Underhive sub-tunnel network. What looks random is actually concentric, a spiral, tightening. He highlighted points of convergence, each forming a circular path descending toward one blinking node. "Old maintenance rings," Batman continued. "Industrial arteries buried beneath the filtration grid, officially sealed a century ago. But I found heat signatures, residual, faint. But they're down there, and they're active." Varnax studied the display. His mechanical eye whirred softly. "You will lead a kill team," the Inquisitor said. 5 troopers, heavily armed. No survivors. Batman glanced sideways. "I work alone." "Not today." The sewer mouth opened before them, like the jaw of some rotting machine god. Massive iron teeth lined the rusted grate, half devoured by corrosion and graffiti. Pipes burst overhead, coughing chemical mist into the abyss. The air stank of rust, blood, and ancient sins. Batman crouched near the threshold, silent and still as stone. He touched a control on his cowl. Filters clicked over his eyes, scanning infrared, biosigns, motion. Behind him, 5 inquisitorial troopers fanned out in perfect military discipline. Their matte black carapace armor was etched with a twin-headed aquila and purity seals. Visors glowed like dying stars. Their bolters hummed, locked and loaded. Batman spoke without turning. Movement below. The team descended. The tunnels were narrow, choked with refuse and broken aqueducts. Glyphs were scrawled across the walls, symbols drawn in blood, feces and ash. Some throbbed faintly with unnatural life. Chanting echoed down the stone, a sound like low growling mixed with hymnals sung backward. Alchemical waste dripped from above. The floor was slick with filth. Here, at the deepest level, the hive's heartbeat became a death rattle. Then they reached the chamber. A cistern long forgotten by maps opened before them, a vaulted dome of decay lit by candles wedged into skulls. Dozens of cultists in blood-drenched robes knelt in a circle around a rusted altar. At its center, a screaming woman writhed against chains. A broken aquila was nailed into her chest. Above her loomed a statue of brass and bone, a horned monstrosity with too many arms and teeth like jagged scripture. Batman raised a fist. The stormtroopers halted, silent as spectres. Then he moved. A flash mine hissed from his belt, erupting mid-air in a detonation of light and sonic force. The cultists screamed. Some clawed at their eyes, others fell into spasms. Before the first body hit the floor, Batman was among them. He dropped from above like vengeance incarnate. The first cultist fell with a shattered collarbone. The second was choked into unconsciousness mid-chant. An electrified batarang slammed into the third one's face, cracking bone and setting flesh aflame. One roared and charged, a mutant, its arms twisted into crab-like claws. Batman ducked, planted a shaped charge and rolled away. Boom. Flesh and bone exploded across the cistern. The troopers advanced in formation. Purge confirmed, their squad leader said. Their bolters roared. Explosions tore through the cultists. Heads were ruptured. Ribs collapsed inward. The floor was painted red. One heretic tried to crawl away, but a bolt round blew his spine apart. A child, no older than 10, staggered into the open, eyes hollow, holding a bone-carved dagger. His face was covered in ash. One of the troopers didn't hesitate. The child's body dropped. Batman spun around. "Stop!" The gunfire continued. 3 more figures, unarmed, cowering, were gunned down in seconds. He lunged, grabbing the nearest trooper, and and slamming him into a support column with enough force to rattle Ceramite. They weren't armed. The trooper's voice was flat. They were corrupted. They were victims. Same thing. Batman's fists clenched. His breath steamed in the cold, blood-slick air. Then, a tremor. The chamber shook. Candles flickered. The chanting stopped. A low growl echoed from the far tunnel. Metal groaned. Bolters clicked up. From the darkness emerged something colossal. The Chaos Space Marine stood over 7 feet tall, clad in crimson plate with black trim. Baroque and brutal. Spikes jutted from his pauldrons. A demon engine hissed on his back like a chained beast. In one fist, a roaring chain axe. On the other, a bolter the size of a child. The mark of Khorne was scorched across his chest plate in molten brass. The cultists dropped to their knees, moaning praises. The Astartes' voice boomed like a war horn. You dare defy the blood god in his temple. Batman stepped forward. His cape whipped behind him in the chemical wind. His cowl glowed softly. His armor, scarred, ash-covered, and patched with new Imperium sigils, gleamed under the system's flickering light. He said nothing for a moment, just stared at the monster before him. Then he spoke, low, grim, cold as stone. Try me. The chain axe roared, the cultists howled, and Batman lunged. The roar of the chain axe was a promise of death. It echoed across the cistern chamber, drowning the last of the cultist chants. The flickering candlelight trembled as the crimson-clad behemoth took one thunderous step forward, each footfall cracking the stone beneath it. The Chaos Space Marine, a champion of Khorne, snarled beneath his jagged helm. Steam hissed from his backpack vents. Gore-covered armor glinted like wet meat in the shadows. Batman stood his ground. The chain axe revved again, its teeth grinding and dripping blood from past victims. Behind him, the inquisitorial troopers shifted nervously. Target confirmed, the squad leader voxed, raising his bolter. Engage. The troopers opened fire. A volley of mass-reactive bolts screamed through the chamber, slamming into the heretic Astartes. The explosions of impact were deafening, showering sparks and gore. And then he moved. The Chaos Marine surged forward like a war train. Bolter rounds ricocheted off his twisted power armor. One soldier barely had time to scream before the chain axe split him from shoulder to hip, spraying blood across the altar. Batman flanked to the left, disappearing into shadow. Another trooper fired point blank. The traitor raised his arm. The bolter fused to his wrist, barked once. The trooper vanished in a cloud of meat and smoke. Batman struck. A timed explosive disc slammed into the Marine's knee joint. It detonated with a concussive burst. Smoke, fire, and shrapnel. The Astartes stumbled. Batman followed up, grapnel hooking onto a pipe overhead, launching him feet first into the heretic's helmet. The impact rang like a cathedral bell. But the traitor didn't fall. He turned. Backhand. Batman crashed into a pillar, the stone fracturing from the force. His ribs screamed. He rolled to the side, barely dodging a follow-up stomp that cratered the ground. 2 more troopers fired. One screamed prayers, the other held his ground. It didn't matter. The chain axe whirled in an arc. One headless body slumped to the floor, the other was bisected. Blood pouring like paint onto the stone. Batman threw a cryo-charge. It burst in blue mist, freezing the Marine's shoulder joint. A distraction. He launched a line, pulling himself behind the traitor. A blade sprang from his gauntlet. He drove it toward the back of the knee. The knife simply snapped. The Chaos Marine twisted, grabbing Batman mid-air. He was hurled like a ragdoll, slamming into the statue of the Blood God. Stone cracked once more. His armor groaned, his vision blurred. The Astartes roared. Feed the earth with blood. He charged. Batman triggered a smokescreen, vanishing again. From the fog, batarangs laced with grav magnets struck the Marine's chest plate, pulling him backward into a collapsing support beam. Batman emerged, firing twin pulse darts into the traitor's faceplate. Sparks burst. Still the Marine advanced. Batman dodged, flipped, slid under a swing. A punch landed, full force on the traitor's side. But it was like hitting an iron furnace. The Astartes caught him mid-motion, lifting him by the throat. You bleed, little shadow. Batman activated an arc mine from his gauntlet. The charge exploded. Electricity ripped across the Marine's armor. He convulsed for a moment, dropping Batman, who hit the ground hard. Gasping, bruised, he crawled. The Marine recovered, slower now, breathing heavy. Black gore dripped from a cracked gauntlet. Then, a thunderclap. The wall exploded. A tidal wave of smoke, flame and debris swallowed the far chamber entrance. From the wreckage came black. 3 giants emerged, their armor dark as midnight, trimmed in ghost grey. Raven Guard. Their matte black paint was adorned with purity seals, winged skull insignias, and the sigil of the Raven. They moved like ghosts, silent and merciless. Every step was the whisper of death. The lead Marine raised his Stormbolter and pointed it directly at the Chaos Astartes. His voice was low and cold. Heretic. The bolters sang. Each gunfire burst was a precision strike. The chamber lit up with controlled fury as mass-reactive shells tore toward the traitor. The Chaos Marine howled, turning into the barrage. His bolter answered, shells slamming into the first Raven Guard, chipping his armor, forcing him back. But they didn't stop. The second Raven Guard activated his lightning claw. Blue arcs danced across the blades. He moved like a phantom, slamming into the Chaos Marine with surgical force. The chain axe retaliated, carving a deep gouge in the floor. Sparks and blood flew. The third Marine flanked, wielding a combat chainsword and bolt pistol. With swift, surgical strikes, he drove the blade into the traitor's back. Metal screamed. Blood and oil sprayed. Batman, barely conscious, crawled to his knees. His HUD was blinking critical. He pulled the thermal charge from his belt and hurled it, straight into the exposed vent at the Chaos Marine's side. Fire tore through the traitor's armor. He staggered, screaming, a sound like a warp storm forced through human lungs. The lead Raven Guard advanced. His gauntlet gripped the heretic's helmet. With a savage twist and a mechanical growl, he tore it free. The Chaos Marine's face, pale, twisted, demonic, was revealed for only a moment before the second Marine drove his crackling lightning claw into it. Bone shattered. The traitor dropped like a felled monolith. The battle was over. Smoke hung thick in the air, rising to the vaulted ceiling like incense to a dead god. Blood and fire pooled across the stone floor. The cultists were long silent. The altar cracked. Only silence remained. Batman knelt beside a broken pillar. One gauntlet pressed to the floor for balance. His breath came ragged. His armor was scorched, his limbs trembling from exertion and pain. He'd pushed himself beyond his limits, and he had only just survived. Silent footsteps approached. The lead Raven Guard loomed over him like a shadow made flesh. He extended a gauntleted hand, heavy, worn, unwavering. Batman stared at it for a moment, then reached out, took it. He was lifted to his feet like a brother in arms. The Space Marine studied him with a gaze like twin obsidian fires behind his helm. "You stood alone against a corrupted Astartes," he said, his voice quiet and grave. "And you lived." He paused. "That earns respect." The second Marine stepped forward, cleaning blood from his clawed gauntlet. "You are not like other Inquisitors we have met," he said. "You almost fight like one of us." The third simply nodded. Batman didn't speak, but he didn't look away. The fire in his eyes still burned. Above them, the Hive trembled. Somewhere in the deep, other cults stirred, other heretics gathered, and in the dark, something watched. A war had begun, and in the shadows, a bat now hunted beside ghosts of death. The chamber still echoed with the silence of death. Blood cooled on cracked stone. The air reeked of burning flesh, cordite, and scorched promethium. Above, the vaulted ceiling of the ancient cistern groaned beneath the unimaginable weight of the hive world that sprawled for miles above. Shadow danced on every wall, cast by the flickering firelight and dying sparks. 3 giants in black armor stood like statues of judgment beside a mortal man who had no right to still be alive. Batman. He knelt beside a shattered altar, one gauntleted hand pressed into the blood-slick floor to keep himself upright. His cape hung in tatters. His cowl was cracked, scorched armor plates steamed with chemical heat, and inside his helm, every sensor screamed critical. Fractured ribs, internal bleeding, oxygen saturation collapsing. But his eyes still burned. Brother Sergeant Kalen of the Raven Guard turned his helm slowly. A whisper over Vox. Movement. A pause. Then the soft click of confirmation from Brother Ultha. Eastern Corridor, 8 signatures, power armor, non-imperial ident codes. Kalen's reply was a whisper of cold steel. Traitors. Batman was already rising. Each motion cost him pain, but he moved anyway. A flick of his wrist activated a dim hologram on his vambrace. A crude wireframe of the cistern chamber unfolded. Paths, vaults, stress fractures. He pointed. There's a collapsed archway. Here. Bottleneck them. I set charges an hour ago just in case. Funnel the survivors to here. He marked another junction with a flick. Fenric, you're closest. Block the fallback route. Kalen didn't even glance at his brothers. Go. He's right. They vanished into shadow like wraiths. The Chaos Space Marines came roaring. They marched down the cistern corridor with the confidence of demigods. 8 of them, hulking, corrupted Astartes. They bore symbols of Khorne, the blood god. One bore a demonic banner that trailed smoke. Another dragged a flail made from fused bones. One laughed. The corridor exploded. Batman's charges detonated with thunderous violence. Masonry collapsed in an avalanche of dust and rebar, crushing the rear elements of the squad. 3 Chaos Marines were buried instantly. One lost a leg and screamed with a voice that cracked stone. Then the Raven Guard struck. Kalen descended from above like a meteor, his jump pack roaring for just a breath of sound before he hit. His power sword sang in the firelight, cutting a Chaos Marine in 2. From the left, Alpha emerged mid-sprint. His lightning claws sparked as he spun through the flailing limbs of a heretic, tearing open hydraulics and ribcage alike. Fenric, the third, burst from the shadows with a bolt pistol barking. He stitched rounds across a traitor's back, then leapt, slamming his chainsword through the gap in the Marine's helm. Batman was moving. He was a blur through smoke and ruin, setting charges, marking targets, throwing echo grenades that split sound across the chamber. Chaos Marines staggered and turned toward the phantom threats. A pair advanced toward the Raven Guard's flank. Batman hurled a batarang laced with a grav magnet, tagging one's power pack. A second later, a mine clamped onto the magnetic signal and exploded, sending the heretic sprawling into a wall. Another traitor turned, raising his bolter. But Batman charged low, sliding under the barrel and jamming a shock spear into the Marine's thigh joint. The electricity surged through the armor, locking the heretic in place. A second bolt round slammed into Batman's side. He grunted. His advanced armor cracked. Blood sprayed, but he kept moving. Kalen saw it. The mortal should be dead, but he moved with the fury of a dying storm. The remaining Chaos Marines regrouped in the center. A Khorne berserker screamed praise to the Blood God and charged at Kalen. Kalen answered with silence. Their blades clashed with the sound of thunder. To the side, Ulthar battled 2 heretics at once. His claws raked against corrupted ceramite, carving craters in their armor. He dodged a flail and responded with a punch so brutal it tore his helmet in half. Batman threw Batman aside, just as a plasma shot vaporized the ground where he'd stood. Move! Batman hit the floor hard. His vision was swimming. His HUD blinked crimson across the board. But still, he rose. One last arc mine in hand. He staggered forward, trailing blood. A Chaos Marine had Kalen locked in a grapple. Batman slammed the mine into the heretic's leg. The traitor fell. Kalen's sword finished him off. And then there was silence again. Only firelight, only smoke, only blood. Batman collapsed. Ultha caught him before he hit the stone. He has a punctured lung, severe internal hemorrhaging. If we don't stabilize, Kalen turned. Bring the apothecarion here. They moved until a voice stopped them. Halt! Troopers emerged from the far corridor, black carapace, red visors, and behind them, a man in crimson and gold. Inquisitor Valen. His voice was smug, cold. Step away from my asset, now. Kalen rose to his full height, 7 feet of ceramite and war. He is wounded. We can save him. He's not yours to save, Valen snapped. He belongs to the Inquisition. Ultha growled. He bled beside us, fought as one of us. Valen sneered. You are Ravenguard. You don't belong on this planet. Kalen's eyes burned behind his helm. It's classified. Valen laughed. Nothing is classified to me. Fenric stepped forward. He'll die in minutes. Your Medici will take hours. Then he dies under our jurisdiction. Kalen took 1 step forward. If he dies, your asset is gone. Your mission fails. We are closer, faster, better. Valen paused. He looked at Batman, bleeding, broken, defiant as always. And he knew Kalen was right. Fine, but I want him back. Kalen nodded. If that's what he chooses, he muttered under his breath. The Ravenguard Thunderhawk roared into the skies in the blink of an eye. Clouds parted before it. Lightning flashed behind it. Within, the apothecarion whirred with surgical efficiency. Batman lay under stabilizers, tubes in his chest. Blood was pumped into him. Machines reconstructed torn flesh. Kalen stood at the foot of the table, his arms folded. Ultha watched quietly. He's mortal, Fenric said, but he fights like a Primarch's shadow. Kalen didn't reply. He just watched the man beneath the mask, the warrior who'd faced gods and monsters. A flicker on the monitor, a twitch beneath the cowl, and in the dark silence of the Ravenguard ship, the bat endured. The world was cold. Then it wasn't. Light pierced the void. Not sunlight, nor firelight. Surgical, pale and sterile. It shimmered against glass tubing and burnished metal, cast shadows across rows of augmetics and hanging autosurgeons. Batman stirred. His lungs were straining as if they'd forgotten their function. Air hissed into his mask, cold, clean, enhanced with oxygen and anticoagulants. He winced. Pain returned with consciousness. It came not like a wave, but as an orchestra, each broken rib a shriek of cello strings, every punctured muscle a thrum of drums. His thoughts lagged. His limbs were numb bricks, and yet he endured. Above him, screens blinked. Vital signs, neurofeedback, reconstructed bone and flesh logged by machine spirit quill. Then came the shadow, 7.5 feet tall, wrapped in matte black ceramite, Kalen of the Raven Guard loomed beside the recovery table like a gargoyle chiseled from midnight. His helmet was off, revealing stark, pallid skin, etched by war, and a narrow scar that traced from the temple to the edge of a sharp, angular jaw. His eyes were darker than the void outside the hull, unblinking, cold, but not cruel. "You're awake," Kalen said. Batman's voice came through cracked lips. "That remains to be seen." Soft metal on metal clanked nearby. Another giant emerged from the shadows of the Medekai Bay. Brother Ulthar, his lightning claws retracted, his arms folded across his chest. "You should be dead," Ulthar said, blunt as iron. Batman turned his head slightly. Even that motion made his skull pound. "I get that a lot." A chuckle. Small, dry. It came from a space marine, and somehow that made it all the more bizarre. Batman pushed himself up on his elbows. Wires were pulled taut. Biotubes hissed in complaint. But he made it upright, grimacing. His torso was laced with surgical mesh and nano repair gel. The bat emblem on his chest plate had been half melted, but remained visible beneath blackened armor. "Where am I?" he asked. Kalen answered. "Aboard the Thunderhawk Retribution, holding orbit above the planet. You were hemorrhaging. A collapsed lung. Your ribs were shattered to dust. Inquisitorial Medekai would not have reached you in time." Batman breathed deeply. Oxygen-rich air helped, but pain still stabbed with every breath. "You brought me here. Saved me." Kalen nodded once. "You earned it." Ulthar stepped closer, his eyes narrowing behind his visor. "You fought with precision, discipline, calculated risk. You disrupted enemy positioning with non-lethal tools. You turned the tide through strategy, not just strength. You fought like one of us," Kalen added. Batman looked down at his cracked gauntlet. The talons on his gloves were chipped. Scorch marks traced the edge of his cowl. "It wasn't bravery," he said. "It was necessity. Duty." Kalen cocked his head. "You don't hesitate to risk death, but you avoid unnecessary killing. That is unusual." Batman's tone darkened. "I don't kill unless I have no other choice. I protect. That's why I fight." The chamber was silent a moment. Even the machines seemed to quiet. Kalen finally asked, "You are not of the Inquisition. Not truly. Who are you?" Batman hesitated, and then slowly he told them. "My name is Bruce Wayne. On my world they called me the Batman. I protected a city called Gotham. I had allies, enemies, a mission. Then there was a tear in reality, a ripple of energy. 1 second I was facing a breach in the multiverse. The next, I was in this galaxy, alone." Ulthar's brow furrowed. "You came from the warp?" "Something like it," Batman said. "I was found by the Inquisition. They labeled me an anomaly. Containment first, study second, then utilization." Kalen's jaw tightened. "They used you?" Batman nodded. They didn't give me much choice. They outfitted me with updated gear and told me I was now an asset, that my survival hinged on performance. Author's expression shifted to a grimace. They forced your hand. I did what I had to, Batman said. But I never stopped trying to protect the innocent, even here, even surrounded by monsters. Kanan looked at him for a long moment. This galaxy is a crucible. It devours mercy. Batman nodded. I've nearly died more times here than I ever did back home. Gotham was a nightmare, but it had limits. This place, chaos, Xenos, heresy, there's no end. A pause. Silence stretched between them, thick and weighty, broken only by the low hum of life support systems and the soft flicker of cogitator runes. The Medicae bay around them glowed with sterile light, casting ghostly halos over surgical arms and blood-slick instruments now dormant. Beyond the reinforced viewport, the golden haze of the planet shimmered in orbit, distant, untouchable. Then Kalen stepped forward, the impact of his boots resonating like war drums against the metal decking. He loomed over Batman, not in dominance, but as a colossus carved from living myth. Our mission here is complete, Kalen said, his voice measured and firm. The cult is broken, their lies extinguished, the temple purged by fire and melter charge. In 3 cycles we break orbit and vanish into the void once more. Batman shifted, wincing faintly as cracked ribs pulled against their bindings. He met Kalen's gaze beneath the cowl, eyes cold and calculating. More chaos. Ulthar emerged from the shadowed bulkhead behind them. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Always. They are Hydra-headed. You sever one, and 3 more seem to take their place. But our war is not waged in open fields, not with banners or glory. We are not the hammer, Kalen said, stepping to the side and folding his arms across his chest. We are the blade, unseen, precise, unrelenting. The words hung in the air, cold and final. Then Kalen turned, his sharp features illuminated by the glow of the surgical lights, and his next words came softer, almost solemn. If you wish to avoid returning to the Inquisition's leash, if you seek something beyond being their tool, we can offer you a path. Batman didn't move, but his breath caught just for a moment. He studied the 2 giants before him, monsters to many, myths to most, warriors of a different age, and yet something in their presence felt familiar, a kinship not of blood, but of principle. Kalen's eyes remained locked with his. Join us, not as a servant, not as a slave to dogma, as a brother in arms. We do not ask for oaths to the Emperor. We do not need another Astartes. What you carry, strategy, will, unbreakable purpose, those are rarer than power armor. Ulthar stepped forward, his towering form casting a long shadow across the floor. You are mortal, but so was Korax before he became legend. Batman lowered his gaze. His hands lay in his lap, scarred, blood-stained, wrapped in cracked gauntlets. Hands that had held the line against madness, that had once gripped the Joker's collar, that had buried friends and enemies alike. I'm not sure I'm strong enough, he admitted. The words were barely a whisper, but there was no shame in them, only truth. Kaelin's lips curled ever so slightly into something that might have been called a smile, though it was more ghost than gesture. Strength is not found in sinew or gene seed. Not always, he said. The Raven Guard were not born of victory. We were born in darkness, raised in silence, molded in the crucible of defeat. We do not strike with brute force. We strike with resolve, with precision, with purpose. He stepped forward once more, slowly, deliberately, and extended his gauntleted hand. Its armoured plates were blackened by war, its knuckles still crusted with the remains of heretics. But it was steady, offered without demand, without expectation. You would not be one of us, Kaelin said, but you would stand with us. Batman stared at his hand. He saw memories behind his eyes. Gotham's skyline cloaked in rain, Alfred's voice, the bat signal flashing in the storm, Jason's scream, Selina's whisper, Clark's hand on his shoulder. Gone, all of it. The Inquisition had treated him like a weapon. The Imperium saw only usefulness. But these warriors, these shadows of war, they saw the man behind the mask. He thought of Gotham, of its alleys, its orphans, its broken men and women, of the vow he made as a boy. He could no longer save them. But here he could still serve that vow. Here, he could still protect those who had no voice. Here, perhaps he could make a difference. He raised his hand. He took Kaelin's grip. The gauntlet closed around his own with firm strength, but surprising gentleness. And in that moment, a pact was made, not of oaths or ceremony, but of silence, of purpose, of shared war in the long, endless dark. Kaelin helped him rise, his massive strength lifting the wounded bat with care more fitting a brother than a soldier. Batman stood, swaying slightly, but upright. Man beside demigod, shadow beside shadow. And somewhere in the deep black void beyond terror, where light dared not reach and hope was often forgotten, a new legend stirred. A man from another universe. The shadow that walked with giants. The bat who hunted with ghosts. Not of the Imperium, but not against it either. He was something else now. A whisper in the dark. A myth made flesh. A guardian not of Gotham, but of the galaxy's forgotten edges. A year later, the sky burned, not with fire, but with bioplasma and shrapnel. 2 alien armies clashed on the ruined world of Maraga 9. Green-skinned orcs rampaged through fungal forests, wielding crude cleavers and ramshackle cannons. Against them surged a Tyranid swarm, a tide of claws, flesh, and endless hunger. The war for the planet's surface was deafening. Monstrous roars shook mountains. Gargantuan spore ships eclipsed the red moons. The jungle was reduced to mulch beneath titanic footfalls. But high above the chaos, orbiting the carnage in absolute silence, was the Raven Guard. Within the stealth-avoided strike cruiser, the umbral spear, no alarms rang, no voices shouted. Instead, data flickered across hollow consoles. Tactical maps rendered in ink black and blood red, updated in real time. Silent operations, precision infiltration. That was the doctrine of the Sons of Korax. And at the heart of the command deck stood a shadow in black. Not a space marine, but something else entirely. Batman. His suit had changed. Gone was the armor scraped from old Earth alloys. Now it was reforged from Raven Guard's stealth ceramite, laced with adaptive optics and friction dampeners. The cape flowed like oil smoke. On his chest, the bat sigil remained, but beneath it gleamed a Raven Guard Aquila in dark steel. His cowl featured a rebreather, an encrypted vox link, and a direct uplink to the Umbral Spear's noosphere. He stood before the central console, watching the battle unfold far below. Kalen's voice crackled through his private channel. "Shadow Talon, this is Reaper 1. We are in position." Batman's voice was calm, deep, and surgical. "Confirm. 7 biosignatures. No patrol rotation for another 30 seconds. Fenric, take high point. Althar, flank left. Kalen, proceed. I'll keep eyes on your rear quadrant." Acknowledged. From orbit, Batman guided them through the smoke and hellfire. Down on the planet, cloaked in their active camouflage, the Raven Guard squad moved like living shadows through the ancient Xenos ruin at the center of the war zone. Pillars of alien stone towered over them, inscribed with language no Imperial scholar had ever translated. Beneath the surface, buried beneath kilometers of twisted vaults, lay their objective. A Xenos artifact of immense psychic power. One the Orcs wanted for destruction, one the Tyranids hungered to consume, and one the Inquisition had quietly ordered destroyed. But Kalen had his own orders. Preserve it, retrieve it, use it to weaken chaos. Batman scanned the surrounding orbital feeds. Tyranid bioforms converged on the east trenches. Orc stompers thundered across the opposite ridge, their rockets screaming. Explosions bloomed like fungal flowers, the chaos of war forming the perfect shroud. Inside the Raven Guard's orbit-to-surface command net, Batman overlaid seismic charts and motion scans. Bioforms, heat signatures, narrow gaps. He spoke again. "Reaper 1, Tunnel Epsilon 3 is collapsing. Divert to Delta 4. Althar, cut power to your left vambrace. The reactor node is pulsing." Althar responded a moment later. Corrected. Fenric voxed next. "Movement above 100 meters. "Confirmed," Batman said. He ran a quick triangulation. "Not Tyranids. Not Orc commandos. Let them pass. They're chasing spores. You'll stay invisible." Kalen reached the vault gate. His vox was a whisper. "Shadow Talon, we are inside." Batman stood still as the dead, his eyes locked on his console. "Proceed." The interior of the vault was a cathedral of nightmares. Pylons of obsidian bone curved into arches that hummed with ancient psychic power. Black lightning crackled through translucent veins in the floor. At the center of the chamber stood the artifact, a sphere of obsidian, floating inches above a triangular plinth. Inside the orb-swirled galaxies, stars, shadows. Althar knelt beside it, his Auspex scanner humming. "The readings are unstable. Whatever this is, it predates the Great Crusade, possibly even the War in Heaven." Kalen reached out. gauntlet hovering over the artifact. Shadow Talon, do we extract? Batman didn't hesitate. Yes. Fenric, initiate containment protocol. Engage the stasis seals. Acknowledged. Suddenly, alarms blared through Batman's headset. Not Imperial, not Orc. A Tyranid synapse flare. Reaper 1, exfil now. You have a Tyranid warrior brood vectoring on your position. 2 minutes. Kalen's voice was grim. They felt it activate. Batman nodded to himself. Then let's give them something else to feel. He turned toward the command crew. Deploy decoy cluster Echo. Simulate a deep plasma discharge 3 clicks northeast. Send false Auspex echoes. Within seconds, false energy signals flared across the battlefield. The Tyranids shifted direction. Lictors hissed and skittered away. Below, the Raven Guard ghosted out of the vault. Kalen's voice. Surface reached. Rendezvous in 2 minutes. Batman tapped his gauntlet. Extraction drop underway. Thunderhawk's silent vow en route. Stealth vector engaged. From the void, a black shape pierced the atmosphere like a dagger. Back aboard the Umbral Spear, the thunderous quiet of the void enveloped the strike cruiser once more. The vault chamber, now sealed beneath triple-layered stasis fields and automated warding rights, remained locked below decks, pulsing faintly with unreadable Xenos energy. Kalen and his squad emerged into the command deck, their shadows trailing behind them. Their black ceramite armor was gouged and pitted, vents still hissing from heat dispersal. Fenric's right pauldron was half melted from acid. Ultha's lightning claws still flickered with residual static. Their forms were giant, wounded, silent, but victorious. Behind them floated the prize, the artifact, secured within a grav-suspended containment field. It shimmered like captured night, an orb of absolute darkness rimmed with a faint corona of psychic static. The machine spirits hissed and clicked as they re-evaluated threat ratings in real time. Sensors struggling to interpret the impossible. Kalen approached the tactical console. Batman stood at its helm, still encased in the matte black plating of his raven-forged suit. His cape hung still, absorbing the dim bridge lights. The twin symbols on his chest, the bat and the raven, gleamed like whispered oaths. Kalen's voice was low, level. Another piece secured. He paused, casting a glance back toward the containment field. Another tool denied to chaos. Batman exhaled slowly. He didn't look away from the data feed. And another step forward. Kalen studied him for a moment longer. This strange mortal in their midst, who had once fought gods in another world, and now fought monsters in theirs. "You've adapted," Kalen said at last. There was no question in it, no judgment, only truth. Batman nodded, but his tone was dry. "I had no choice." From the side of the bridge, Althar's deep voice cut in, quieter than usual. "But you chose to remain. Even after the Inquisition thought you dead, you could have left us." Batman's gaze turned toward the viewport, toward the ocean of stars beyond, a vastness too deep for any man to hold in his thoughts. "I found purpose here," he said finally. "In the silence, in the shadows, in making sure monsters never touch the innocent, even if they never know who saved them." He paused, long enough for the bridge to fall still again. The only sounds were the subtle hum of the engines and the ever-present thrum of the ship's internal life. But still, Batman continued, every night I wonder. His voice had grown softer, distant. Is Gotham still standing? Did Nightwing keep it safe? Did Gordon survive? Or Alfred? For a long moment, no one replied. Kalen moved to stand beside him, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the console. You serve the Imperium now, the Raven Guard sergeant said quietly. But your war was never about thrones or gods, not even about vengeance. It was about protection, the defenseless, the vulnerable. That hasn't changed. Batman gave a faint, tired smile. It was the kind of expression that never reached his eyes. That doesn't change, he murmured. Not in any universe. He looked up at Kalen. You strike from the dark. You walk alone where others fear to tread. You fight so others never have to know there was a battle at all. And so do you, Kalen said. You always have. They stood in silence, two soldiers from different realities, bound not by origin, but by purpose. Behind them, Arthur stepped forward, wiping gore from his gauntlet with a patch of his tabard. The artifact's potential is unknown. The Inquisition would have destroyed it, but perhaps it will give us the edge we need. Batman nodded once. If it keeps the galaxy from falling further, then it's worth the risk. Kalen looked down at the console. A new transmission was waiting. Another encrypted data packet from the Raven Guard's forward scouts. Coordinates. A signal flare. Another cult. Another war. He tapped the display. The hologram flickered to life, revealing another war zone. Another wound in the galaxy. There are always more battles, Kalen said, his eyes never leaving the flickering light. More missions, and always more shadows. Batman nodded, stepping up beside him. His cowl caught the edge of the blue glow. Then let's find the next one. He reached forward, typing silently with gloved fingers. Target zones began to narrow. Strategic assets appeared. His voice was calm, precise, focused. Forward recon has a signal from Molstis 4. Faint, buried under interference. Could be Xenos. Could be Chaos. Kalen's eyes narrowed. So we investigate. Quietly. Batman's fingers moved faster. Sending infiltration schematics now. I'll plot the insertion vectors. If there's a war waiting, we end it, Kalen finished. And behind them, as the command deck dimmed once more into the tactical twilight of the umbral spear, two symbols gleamed side by side on the console's surface. The Bat and the Raven. The man from another universe. The weapon of shadow. The one who walked with giants. And though he served the Imperium with silent precision and grim resolve, he never stopped searching for a way home.